Yarek, Aisha, Behrad, 2 episodes every week.
Maincast, product innovation and UX design podcast.
Go. Yeah, so that's it, Martin. How are you doing?
Doing good. Almost weekend. The sun is shining out here for the second weekend in a row, so that's a good thing. But
don't jinx it, though.
No, I'm not going to jinx it. And otherwise, I'm just going to watch some Formula One, right? I mean, what else should we do in the weekend?
Are you a big fan?
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
It's huge. Like it's a whole ceremony. Like you got to Friday. I started slowly getting into it.
Did you know that we're recording right now while the Spanish free practice is running right now? So hey, you've got my attention right now.
Thanks for coming by. I know the whole. Do you watch it from Friday or you just watch it on Sunday?
Well, of course, we've got a company and we've got people working at the office. But normally we do put on the TV on Friday and in the background watch the free practice. Yeah, that's what we do.
There is you guys are remote or is there office?
There is an office, but we work. It's just one sort of office day, and the rest of the week we're remote.
So is the remote policy product of Corona pandemic, or
no? We already worked like that before COVID.
Seriously,
yeah.
Wow.
So but the whole COVID thing for us was like, finally, we don't have to explain that we can just do everything online and work like that.
Exactly. No, it's cool. Like, because like we sort of like on the same Bonanza Design was and is a remote company. Then
it works. It can work properly, even in innovation or with creative stuff. If you manage it properly, if you structure the conversations properly, there are so many tools that you can just leverage to do that online.
So, if I may, what's in your tool cocktail, so to speak?
That's a good one. For brainstorming, it's Miro. And we've got some boards set up that we typically use.
Yeah.
We've built our own Microsoft Teams add-on. So we work in the Microsoft environment because typically most of our customers work in the Microsoft environment or ecosystem. That tool that we built for the Microsoft Teams environment is built to structure all the experiments and everything that comes out of the experiments. And while that works really cool because now everyone can just read what was going on in certain experiments or what specific interviewees or participations of that experiment were doing. So that works very, very good online. And Notion. I fell in love with Notion, and
seriously,
I don't think I will stop using Notion.
Oh wow, okay. Notion has a lot of like some of our team because like we don't really like we have certain tools that everyone needs to use like Figma. That's basically the tool that we use. We use Zoom too because we can record and like go back to the conversation, pick up certain things. Often, like, you know how it goes with the innovation studios, like we come in first week, the pressure is on. Hey, you need to deliver. I was like, let's just get to know each other first. And then, no, you have to deliver. So we record everything by default. Like in Zoom, we did this. I enabled there's a setting that you can record a conversation as you start the conversation, which is really cool. So we record everything by default.
Yeah, that's a good thing. We for the team meetings we don't do that anymore, but in the beginning we did. But in practice we saw that nobody was watching it. And what I'm trying to do right now, because of course AI, everyone is talking about AI, so let's just pick the topic here as well. But we are experimenting with the transcribation, so transcribing, what's going on in the conversation, and especially then summarizing and getting all the tasks out. We're not there yet, but we're close, and that will really, upgrade it to another level.
That summarizing the task is a very compelling use case. I love to see. Have you tried this Meta Gig? It's an app that basically come to your Zoom conversation. We work with, and then transcribe everything. So it doesn't provide the task list at the end, but I think it's a matter of if and when rather than.
So if you go onto YouTube, go start looking into the second brain templates for Notion, and this guy, I forgot his name, but he really has an in-depth video about how to use the transcription, use the AI within Notion, and just get summarizations and tasks out of literally everything that you record. It's not live yet, so as in it's not real time that it transcribes and summarizes. But hey, if you need to wait 10 minutes, that's still fine, right? I mean, it's amazing what it can do.
Hours saved.
Yeah, I'll share you the link later, but that's cool.
Fantastic. Already a fantastic tip from this podcast. 6 minutes in. Maarten van Kroonenburg, if I pronounce your name correctly, is I'm going to leave it to you to explain what you do, but the founder of BW Ventures, innovation consultation studio based in Netherlands. Maarten, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast.
No problem at all. I like to be part of this whole podcast series, and I enjoy being here. Thanks again.
Maarten, so you've been at it for almost 8 years now, and can you just walk me through your journey? Leave it up to you when you want to define the starting point. But how did you come across BW Venture? What kind of problems you saw? And just your journey would be fantastic.
Yeah. So I'll start a little bit earlier than BW Ventures. My career basically started in the music industry. I produced electronic music, got a contract from a bigger label. I saw the contract and I thought, I'm not going to sign that. It was a bit naive and stubborn to think that. I mean, you've been 19 years old as well, and you know how stubborn and naive you could be. But at that moment, I was like, no, I'm never going to sign this, and I'm just going to do this on my own. I literally walked out of that meeting, walked to the Chamber of Commerce, and the day after, I set up my first company. And what I did there was I started with one record label, and over a few years, I grew it to 3 record labels, a bookings agency, event organization, and a pretty prestigious blog, which sort of connected all these activities into, I shouldn't name it a real growth engine, but it was sort of acting like that. And you have to reframe this in a time where Spotify was still growing in Europe. So back then I was in a very niche sort of music genre. And when we started out, there were maybe 10 to 20 artists from our genre in Spotify. And then week after week, you saw their stats doubling. So everything that we came up with was like, oh my, what's happening? Spotify already did this, and they did this, and they did this. And we were still sort of checking, is Spotify going to be the winner? Is Deezer going to be the winner? Beatport was still there and pushing things. So everything was changing literally every week. So that taught me to quickly analyze what fans were doing and what was your value as a record label or as an event manager to your fans, but also to the artists, because you needed to close deals with artists, but also with with your fans. So that's where I started to learn more about design thinking principles, lean startup, customer development, and that still was very, very small back then. There was not a lot of conversation about that, especially in the Netherlands and Belgium, Germany. Like maybe 2 or 3 people were talking about that. So I started to experiment with that in my own company. I was still studying back then as well. And for some reason, I started to see that this whole model, this whole sort of paradigm of thinking and building, new propositions was something I got way more energy out of than the music industry. I also sort of plateaued there, and there are long nights in the music industry. It's not really sustainable. So I was on this sort of crossing path, and my external thesis assessor, he mentioned to me, Maarten, you're doing cool stuff with that whole music business, but what you've written down as a model to double your own revenue within half a year, test that. Just try and test it with other companies and see how well that could work. So I first, did some cases as a freelancer, and then I saw massive results. And I thought to myself, okay, this should be the new route. I think this is something that I can put way more, it sounds weird, but way more creativity in there compared to managing artists and managing a music label. I could put more of my actual sort of business design kind of skills in. And that's where BW Ventures, Blue Whale Ventures started. And at first we started to help startups with a pre-acceleration program. And let's define pre-acceleration because what we saw is that the most acceleration programs, again, this is 8 years ago, so keep that in mind, please. 8 years ago, the acceleration programs were really, really good in scaling up a proven value proposition.
Right.
But going from nothing to a proven value proposition, in my opinion, it's the most fundamental thing that you should do with anything that you do in building a new venture.
Right.
And it's so crucial before you can scale up anything. But we also saw that it's sort of a skill on its own. Don't ask me why, because for me it feels like a sort of second nature, but it is quite hard. And I've learned that over the past 8 years that it's not a given that you could just do that. So that's how we started. Then everything went super well. We first half a year to a year, we did great things. And then, of course, the entrepreneurial story hits again. But we had this sort of ambition. I started it with my external thesis assessor. We had an ambition to buy a web and app development company. So we bought it. And then everything went down. We did everything out of the book that we shouldn't have done. Maybe luckily I was 26 or 27 years old. So it's early enough to learn from your mistakes. But that made me realize after 2 or 3 years working very hard and still, it didn't work out properly. I decided to stop that business, go back to the drawing board, because we went from 20 people back to just myself. And I reiterated our own value proposition, because there were accelerators popping up everywhere. Like even the smallest villages had accelerators for startups. And I mean, in that red ocean, I didn't want to compete anymore. Then we started to redraw our own value proposition again. And what we figured out is that a lot of corporates want to build new ventures, but it's always a sort of, are we just going to buy or invest in startups and scale-ups, or just buy companies? Are we going to do it on our own? What's the most efficient way? What can we do? How can we get our people in that sort of mindset? And that's where we found our sort of product market fit, because that's where we really blossom. It's a combination of designing new businesses, training people to run these businesses for corporates. And then once they start to grow, we even help find other propositions that we can buy to, organically scale the venture, but also buy other companies to add on top.
So a lot of different direction I could take this, but what I would love to touch base on is that if you want to reflect on your acquisition, first of all, very impressive at the age of 25, 26, you do your own first acquisition. I think that's very bold, buying a 20 people agency. Why it wasn't a good acquisition strategy, that purchase?
Very good question. We stepped into our own pitfall. We didn't practice what we preach. As in, what we did, we had an assumption that if we could validate a proposition, so we understood what a customer wants to get solved for themselves, right? What kind of commitment that they give to you. And commitment can be a payment. It can also be a sort of time commitment, but you need to understand what kind of commitment they give back to you. Mm-hmm. If you understand that, you can also give them a promise of value, right? Mm-hmm. And then you start to understand, what do I need to do? What do I need to build? Or what kind of service do I need to deliver to get back on my promise and to deliver that promise? Mm-hmm. And if they're happy, then they're going to refer new customers, and you can start the whole cycle over and over again. And that's how you scale. We had an assumption that if people validated their proposition, so they knew what to promise towards their customers, that we can help them build the actual solution. Mm-hmm. But we didn't validate that ourselves, which meant we bought. And this agency was focused on helping other SMEs, so not startups, but SMEs. And that was a very cultural mismatch, if I look back on it. And it's 5 years ago, so I can really look back properly to it now. But that was a mismatch, which is, well, on one hand, kind of funny, but it also teaches me a lesson again. Because even if you really understand how to test a value proposition, you still need people around you that keep you aware of all the assumptions, all the pitfalls of validating your own value proposition. And that's the biggest mistake that we made there. And then after that, you need to fix and try to come up with something completely new. But if there's a solution that doesn't fit with what your customer group really wants, sometimes it's better to just let go of that solution.
Basically killing it before it's growing into something that is not usable. Yeah,
and especially putting more and more and more capital to it, because that you're sort of into it, right? And you don't want to fail yourself. So you're trying to put more and more capital into it to still make it work. Mm-hmm. But if that product market fit, if that value proposition is not aligned with what your customers want, then sometimes it's just better to stop and kill the project or kill the company, even if it doesn't work out.
So basically, your acquisition wasn't spot on because you thought everyone wouldn't want a web application or whatever, but like the biggest pain point of startups, that target market that you were looking for to offer supports, were not about the output, the application, but actually a solution that could work for their target customers.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly that. That wasn't a good match. And because I've experienced it literally on my own, it wasn't a good time in my entrepreneurial journey, as in mentally, that wasn't a great time. But the because I experienced it like in the real world, not from a book, we also see that same thing still happening over and over and over again in our current client portfolio. Because what we do see, and it's not like they bought another company, but what's often been done is they invest a lot in solution development or product development without really understanding what the market wants from them and what the company can get back in return. And I'm talking millions here. I've seen a lot of companies that invest like 3 up to 10 million euros or dollars or like a lot of money in a phase in which they still don't really prove what the customer wants to give back to you. And it doesn't matter if it's a consumer product or a B2B product. The fact that you need to understand what the minimum promise is that you can make and what you get in return before you start really developing or buying that one solution that fits there, we continuously see that. And I think that is, going back to your first question, that's the biggest problem that we can solve. And it's not an easy all-time one strategy, always the same thing, because there's a sort of path to go there. There's a sort of process that you can go there, go to get that question answered. But the mistake that we made, we still see that in practice quite a lot.
It's interesting that you said. So let me reiterate. What is the minimum promise that we can promise, and what customers are willing to give back to us?
Yeah. Shall I give you an example of this?
Please. Yeah. It's very, very, very important topic.
Yeah. So let's think of, I've got one. So we've helped a customer. I'm not going to name the exact names because there are some NDAs left and right, but we've helped a company that created a agenda. And that agenda was there to help structure or invite people that give care to someone else. With the assumption that if you need to give care to someone else, that you do that with multiple people. They had quite a lot of users in there. However, the amount of users no one was paying for that solution, and there was still money flowing out. So we were asked, can you help us create a business model for that? So we mentioned, well, I don't know if we can really create a business model for the agenda function on its own, but let us go back to your original mission. What do you want to do for that target group, which is helping them give care to others easier? Right. So we went back. We did a lot of problem discovery interviews with them. And the one thing that came out there was that giving care to someone else, to your granddad or to your partner or some other loved one, the ones that have the biggest problem with that do that on their own. Makes sense, right? And it's
intimate.
Yeah, and you're not going to share that with someone else. So the functionality of an agenda, it could be useful. It's a sort of nice to have, but it's not a painful enough problem to start paying for a solution there. So they didn't understand what to promise towards that caregiver and get something in return. The only thing they did is they gave something, they got an account in return, but they didn't know how to capitalize on that. Because the problem and the solution, they were not aligned.
Wow. So here's the thing. Their initial assumption that the act of care is a multi-actor process. So we need to provide support or provide a support team for that care. But based on your discovery, you realize that the actual behavior of customers, the way they conduct, the way they do provide their care is very intimate and one-on-one, and they want to take care of their loved ones themselves. So that's a disconnect, or that's a gap in what they assume to be the solution and actual behavior of customers. So this solution that they had in mind was not supporting the customers in performing their care.
Exactly. And
wow.
then
Okay, that's huge.
Let's challenge this, because let's go one level deeper to really understand how important it is to understand, the real problem there. So the problem was that these people were giving care on their own to one of their, or sometimes even two of their loved ones. If you think about that just quickly, you could still come up with that agenda because you want to share giving care to that one person. Sorry, there's a cat coming in. That could be your first sort of level of a solution. But if we dove deeper into that and we started to really understand why it was a problem that they, couldn't share that giving care to someone else. On one hand, there's a big time constraint because most of them were still working. They were still working and trying to combine that with other stuff. They had children. If they needed to adjust their agenda, so their day-to-day agenda, to all the others, it cost them more time to actually do that. Now, there's also a money issue there because they need to work. They need to sometimes also, they need to feed children. They need to do a lot of stuff there. So in the Netherlands, because this was a Dutch company, in the Netherlands there's a lot of support for caregivers. And with support, I mean government support in subsidies, grants, and all that sort of stuff. Tax benefits, you name it. But because there was so little time, they didn't understand how they could fix all this sort of regulation. And they didn't know where to find entry to the regulations if they rejected the application. What do we need to do then, etc., etc. And now we started to get into a real problem because this was something they didn't even know where to begin. But then they needed for example, a wheelchair. And in the Netherlands, you can get a subsidy or a grant for that. But where do I need to go? And in the meantime, you still need to give care. You need to do all the other parts. And that's where we started to create a real solution where people were actually, they really wanted the solution, but we're still not there yet. So let's get there. They really wanted to have a solution like this. We did a sort of pilot there because people were committing to it. Yes, we got some customers that also paid for it, but then we wanted to scale up. Yeah. And then we saw, okay, but wait a minute here. We've got a solution that works. We've got a problem that we can really solve. But now, if we want to scale up, we need more and more people that pay for that same service. But most of the people already had trouble with money because otherwise they could have fixed this themselves. So we, it's a sort of new hurdle in building that venture. So we sat down and we started to analyze the full ecosystem. So what's the ripple effect of this one problem? Right? The ripple effect was that the people that gave care for their loved ones and were also working had a higher percentage of being ill themselves.
That's right. Makes sense to me.
18% of, I don't know what the actual proper word in English is for this, but well, the illness rate, I know it's not the proper word, but the illness rate, 18% of all the illness rates are being caused by caregivers that give care to someone else. Now, if you calculate that, and we knew how many days that were, then you see the actual ripple effect of what that one problem did, and where the actual value of fixing that problem was. And that's where we started to find not only a problem and solution fit, but also a business model fit.
Okay.
Which is of course the people that they work for. So your employer is sort of buys a service to help the caregiver ease out all the regulation for them and get them set up properly, which means they also can work more efficiently and are going to be less ill for them. And that's, then you've got that's a real ripple effect.
So basically, it's fantastic example, by the way. Thank you for bringing this. Is much appreciated. Basically, you put the caregiver as your hero, as your real customer, try to understand their journey, say, okay, let's not try to basically shove our solution in their mouth.
Nope.
Let's try to understand the way they give care, the way that they would like to give care, because care is ultimately a very intimate experience. Probably you had tons of trouble and problem interviewing people, because this is such an intimate process or work as well. And then you were like, hold on a second, we know a couple of problems, and you sort of like spotted one problem and say, okay, we have a solution for it, but that's not scalable. We cannot turn it into a business. Let's dig deeper and understand where we can create the most impact and focus on that area instead, hoping that we can achieve an economic of scale as well.
Exactly.
Wow.
For me, this is why I love doing this job.
And how long did this process take?
About 6 months.
I believe you. And is it shareable to see like how many interviews, like what was the intensity of the work?
So, let's go. We split this up in like sort of two processes. And one, we still work with the pre-acceleration program, and the pre-acceleration program takes about 3 months. The end result of that is having a commercially feasible plan, meaning we understand the first part of that circle that I talked about. Who's the potential customer? What kind of problems can we solve for them? What kind of existing alternatives do they use but don't work for them? And how can we 10x that? What kind of promise do we need to make? And what is the type of commitment that we get back? That's what we can solve within 3 months. Then after that, you need to build your first product or service, and you need to build your first marketing and sales engine. Now, that second part is where you do your first pilot, where you actually get your first case studies and leverage these case studies. And that is where we understood, hey, we can't scale this. So we got the first commitments, but we can't scale the amount of people that we help, because the inflow of money was getting a bigger and bigger problem. So we got back to the drawing board, and within 3 months we understood, hey, the employers could be a very, very good a customer, and the end user is the hero of the customer journey. Now, after that, so we've got 3 months of pilot, 3 months of reiterating towards the employers, and then about half a year to a year to scale up the full marketing and sales project. Now, if we're talking about the amount of customers or potential candidates that we interviewed in that pre-acceleration program, and well, don't be scared by this number, but we typically talk to about 90 to 120 people.
Woo!
Yeah. It's not
Bravo.
a typical design sprint. But why do we do that?
Yes, please.
The ripple effect. I want to have a full picture of problem number one. It's like the cause and relationship between problem number one, number two, number three, number four, and number five. So only within problem discovery, it's about 30 to 40 interviews. And all in sort of sets of 10. It depends
Each
a little
campaign.
bit. Yeah, and it depends a little bit on, you know, what kind of customer group you're talking to, and if you really validate the first interviews already. Because if you hit the goal pot immediately, then, you know, don't go on and talk to 40 people because you already understand what the problem is. But in general, that's 1 out of 10 where that happens. Maybe even 1 out of 20. It's not
If you're lucky, yeah.
You're really lucky. So if you really understand that, then you continue to that solution discovery, and there you talk to about 20 to 30 people. Just understanding what are the existing alternatives that you use, why do you love them, why do you hate them, and what do you want to get out of that? What is your desired state? And if you understand that, then you go to the drawing board, write out the first, you know, value proposition, and then you start pitching a lot. So you're at about 60 people right now, if you combine that, and then you start to do 30 to even 60 pitches. Also
To the customers directly.
And you want to get a commitment of them. So let them sign a letter of intent or a contract or whatever. But you want to have them make an actual commitment and really go through a sort of buying process. But because you're pitching to them and you're in front of them, you see why they don't want to do something. And that for me is way more valuable than that they just sign the first time.
Oh man, zillions of questions. So you put them on this spot that say, hey, Martin, thank you for next Thursday meeting. We would like to pitch you a service, a product that we believe could address your problem and improve your situation. And as a result, and not as a result, in return, we would love to see whether if that solution works for you, whether you are willing to write a commitment agreement with us, and so basically putting them on the spot so they can actually not being nice to you, but actually give you input that you could take and improve the product service further.
Yes. Because if they don't commit, the problem is not big enough. Or your solution that you're proposing is not really what they think could help them out. And the beauty is, you don't even need a prototype. You don't even need you don't need nothing. And of course, it can help a little bit if you can show, you know, a sort of mock-up ID or something else, but it's not necessary in that stage.
At the pitch level.
Exactly. And that you know, that whole sort of build-up can be done within 3 months. But for me, the sort of the difference with a design sprint, yes, in a design sprint, you also learn about, you know, you're going to empathize with a user or with the champion of a customer journey. But the amount of depth that you get out of a longer process is really going to help you build or design a business. In a design sprint, for me, what you're doing is emphasizing to either build or sketch the first version of a solution, but not the first version of a business. And
interesting.
That for me, that's a big difference, because the business is going to run based on cash flows, right? Cash needs to come in. You're going to do something in that machine, and value is going to get out. And that value needs to be used by a customer. And that customer brings in money to help you get to more and more customers. And for me, there's the big difference why a design sprint can be shorter, right? I mean, it's a tool that we also use.
Right.
But for creating an actual business, I think that's too short, because you can't really get someone to a full buying process. Get them towards that one commitment to figure out what you need to adjust on every length.
Martin, what would you suggest if one of the executives are listening to this and is like, hey, I'm going to drop next 2 weeks, I'm going to put my lean startup hat on, I'm going to pitch this new product, that concept we are working on, new business idea we have to 20 customers. Should they go into that calls and into those meetings with a price point in mind, or do they just like pitch the idea and see what they are reacting? How detailed your pitch should be?
Very good question. And I'm going to answer this in two parts.
Please.
So part one, yes, you should have a pricing point in mind.
Okay.
Because you're going to pitch value, and you also want to test what kind of price they value you at. Never ask how much they want to pay, because you're going to get horrible questions there. It can be fun, but don't build a business on that. Part two of that answer is start with the problem discovery to get to a very good pricing point.
Okay.
Because if you understand how big the problem is, how much time they spend or how much money they spend on other alternatives that don't work, if you understand what the impact is of something else, what you literally can do is make a calculation in front of the people that you pitch to. And then you're empathizing. Because the only thing that they can state is, wait a minute, you understand how much time I'm wasting on, for example, putting in X or Y in my computer or in that software, and I'm still every single time doing this, and on a monthly basis, that's costing me 20 hours a month. And you already understood how we value that time, and then say, hey, but we're 1/10 of that price or 1/5 of that price. What's holding me back? Why shouldn't I do that?
Fantastic answer. It means like you are not coming up with the price point. You let your discovery dictate the value that you can save for the customers. And then if you can illustrate that properly in that pitch call, then it's already a buy-in.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic answer. It's one of the best answers I've got on this topic.
Well, that's a good thing. And what I've learned over the years is that if your value is good enough, and if you can really explain what the value is that you can deliver, price doesn't always matter.
I agree.
If people start to talk about the price, then in the beginning you've done something. You've done something wrong. However, to avoid these discussions, you should have a price that is easily justifiable within that full frame of the problem. So if you can really state that your price is going to be 5 times lower or 10 times lower than the problem itself, it's an easy rationale to get there. And then still keep in mind that, a buying process is 10% or 15% is rationale. The rest is an emotional process. But the emotional part should be covered because you really understand their problems and their frustrations. So the last thing is it's the easy part.
Right. So basically go into that pitch, first of all, connect to them on an emotional level, talk about the problem, prove them you understand the problem, prove them that you know your numbers, you know like how cumbersome or time consuming this process is, then after that it's a easy sailings, because if you know that this problem costs them 40 hours per month, then the rest is just a simple calculation.
Exactly. And if you're not working with an hourly business, but for example, there's a machine running somewhere and you know how many, I don't know, bottles that it spits out per minute. And you know that one little sensor is withholding them to spit out 100 every minute instead of 10 every minute. Then that's also a calculation, because you understand what the constraint is and what the effect of these constraints are. You also understand the value, and then you can you can go back and put the price there. And if you pitch that, it's going to be easier.
Maarten, in the past 30 minutes, you beautifully illustrated a process that you went through to design a business model that could scale itself.
Yep.
And clearly, this is an example for me, or this has been a clear example for me how business design is different from solution design, aka design sprint. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a problem with a lot of designers and innovators, that they mistake these two together. Care to explain more here?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of product-led growth. Let's get that out of the way. So the product should be really good to help solve a solution, because if the product is really good, in the later stages, it's going to help you grow. But don't put the solution design in front of designing the business, and how, from a super early stage, understanding how your business model and how your earnings model is going to work. I even preach that you should do the latter before the first one, meaning first design the business model, get the commitment, because then you truly understand what people commit to. So what is it that you need to build to fill in the promise? In practice, you even see that designers even product managers and product owners then have an easier job getting from sketch 1 to product version 1, because you can also focus and narrow down the amount of features that you need to put in there.
100%.
And I think the two, work super well together. But if in a commercial environment, then first figure out, what people want to pay for, what kind of value that you're going to deliver, and then the rest will flow out way easier. Is that an answer to your question?
That's beautiful. So basically, your recipe for success, especially in the pre-acceleration seed phase, is that do a heavy product discovery. And I think your example that you brought up, and this amount of interview so far has been the most intense research campaign I've heard of. Really, do a use problem discovery methods to really understand that sort of like your sphere of influence, what kind of problems you can really influence, what could fit your vision or your capabilities and skills, and then try to get to the commitment with simple pitch. Have the commitment locked in, so you have a clear relation. You understood the relationship between your value proposition and the problem that customers have. Then from that level of clarity, everything else that needed to realize that product service would be a lot easier if you start instead with a design sprint campaign.
Exactly.
for example.
Yeah, exactly. Even internal stakeholder management is going to be a little bit easier because you've had so many conversations. You've got so much proof that, well, come up with a very good argument to not do something. If it really is a good argument, then you should go back to the drawing board and potentially even have a little bit more conversations. But just understanding your customer that well is really going to help your internal stakeholder management, get you to a next stage. Now, one last topic I want to touch upon, because I think that is of great value, especially if you start scaling your business here. So everyone wants to scale the product or the service, right? It's sort of the holy grail. And in my opinion, scaling starts in the design of the business.
Okay, that's interesting.
Because if the design in the beginning, so in the first phase, is not proper enough, if you don't know where to specifically focus, it's going to be hard to scale. Because what I see, especially in corporate environments, is that there is a solution and they start to find use cases for everything and they want to sell everything. So that results in two things. One, you're going to adjust the product to more and more sort of users. It's not really going to help you because then in the end, you're still making white label solutions to every type of customer. That will not help you scale. On the other hand, your sales team doesn't understand what the actual value is that you can still copy and copy and copy and copy. So the compound of learnings is not going to help you there because you're learning something new every single time. But where do we need to place that in everything, right? So if from a very early stage you already get that same commitment, and it's every time, 10 times, it's exactly the same thing that they committed to. In a later stage, you're going to learn how to optimize that value proposition, that sales process, and that product. Then if you've got enough customers, then you can start diverting into a adjacent customer group, learn from that, and then start compounding and creating your own real market there.
So let me summarize, because I feel like this is huge for corporates. Corporates start in a product category or service category, then they look around, they already have network of customers for their other products, so they have a bit of a distribution channel already. They reach out and they end up building product for case by case, building products for every case use case that they hear in these discovery calls, and they ended up having this massive cocktail of different features that no sales team can sell to another company.
No. And then your product owners and product managers get a little bit angry because they need to adjust the product every single time. There's no scalable operation because it's just something else that they need to do. And then, there's no balance between marketing and sales, between your product, your operation, and, the rest of the team that needs to do this. If you could really align that, that's how you can get to, the first scaling parts of the business. Let's say to your first 1, 2, 3 million in revenues. After that, it's going to be a different ballgame. But especially that first thing, these 4 sort of building blocks need to grow at the same time based on one value proposition with the same commitment. I hope that makes sense.
That makes total sense to me. That's when you achieve a point in your design process, business design process, that you say, okay, now we get to a unit of scale that now we can like basically build a business around it, put resources to it, because we know exactly how to pitch this. We know exactly how long our sales cycle take, and you get to a level of predictability that you can build a business around it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Lovely. Wow. Hey, I really need to ask you this, because a good portion of this audience probably asked this or asked themselves while you were talking about this. It's like, Maarten, 90, 120 customer interviews is too much. Is that such a thing? Could it be that you get to a point in your research process where you say like, okay, it's enough? Or could you always benefit from conducting another round of interview?
If you think you've interviewed enough people, you're going to just start pitching. Pitch whatever you think is going to convert. If the first 2 customers say no, you don't know enough.
Amazing.
To give you some numbers there, because we track a lot of our own data as well. Out of the 200 projects that we've helped, about 90% of all the projects got towards these interview numbers. So that's number one. 87
so 90 to 120.
Yeah. Then the second part of that number is, in the past 2 years, we've achieved a ratio of 80s. I need to say this correctly. 78. Sorry, I'm Dutch, so I always was randomize these numbers. 78% of the projects that we're in that didn't have any commitment were able to achieve the first written, signed letters of intent or contracts after these 3 months, including all these interviews. And I think, because I always thought we were at like 40%, but we started to track the data real properly, and it's 78%, and that's, I think, a very high number.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Oof.
And yes, it's hard to find 90 to 120 people to talk to, but the value that you get out of that is so enormously that I think you have to do the sort of proper groundwork there to get you towards what everyone wants, which is like the scaling. And if after so many people you're not able to get towards these commitments, then stop the project, because probably the market that you're going after, or the sort of problem that you're trying to tackle, is not big enough.
It's not big enough.
And then you're saving a lot of money, because mostly the corporates keep on investing, and then after 3 years they pull the plug.
So thank you a lot for this. Like, this is one of those episodes I'm most likely going to go back and listen to it, because there is a lot of hands-on practical inputs on how you can design better business models, Maarten. So thank you for this amazing 60 minutes of conversation. I know that you have something in the works. So I don't want to put you on the spot and say something if you're not ready to talk about it.
I am.
Can you?
Yeah, I am. So first of all, I'm going to do a little bit shameless self-promotion here. Follow me on LinkedIn. I share one sort of corporate innovation tip every single working day. My LinkedIn profile is Maarten van Kroonenburg. You will probably not understand how to write that, but I guess in the title my name will be. So you will find.
We will put it in the link too.
Perfect. I've written a book about that first pre-acceleration phase. It's not as in the whole text is there. Yeah, is there. We're still designing the images, and I hope to release that book somewhere this year, maybe early next year. But that's hopefully on the latest. But if you follow me on LinkedIn, you will of course keep on getting updates about that.
Fantastic. I would love to get a copy for sure.
I will put you on the list.
Please. This has been super useful. I mean, it was a bit of a surprise for me on a Friday afternoon. Maarten, it's been a full-on conversation. I know that you have some other things to do. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on the podcast and being super open about your previous experiences. I learned tons here. Any last words?
Thanks a lot for listening, and thank you again for having me. It was a lovely conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.